Recording in progress.
We're going to be recording the session, and the session will also be on live stream on the Gender Links regional Facebook page. And you can follow the conversation. You can tweet under Voice and Choice, hashtag Voice and Choice, hashtag International Safe Abortion Day, which is ISAD 2022, and get involved in the discussion, and let's elevate the discussion further. For us to kickstart this discussion, we have a lineup of key speakers who will lead us in our discussion for today. And the key speaker, our first key speaker for today will be Lynette Mudekunye, who is the Southern Africa Gender Political Barometer Safe Abortion Chapter author. And she's the one who put together the latest barometer chapter that we have, and the barometer which will be launched in October. So I give the floor to Mrs. Mudekunye. Just a kind reminder that we mute as we enter, and we keep on mute, raise our hands and when we want to make a contribution. But for now, we give the floor to Mrs. Mudekunye to give us a presentation on the key barometer findings for safe abortion in Southern Africa. I don't know if you would like me to share the screen, or you will share.
Please, would you?
Okay.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us. I am going to be sharing what we have found for the Voice and Choice Barometer this year.
Can we perhaps, just before you continue, can we perhaps advise that if there's anyone next to you who's also using the Zoom call, if they could switch off, or if they could not join, because there's an echo.
I know there's an echo. I don't know where it's coming from.
It's fine now. It's fine.
Okay, thank you. So Tari, we can go straight on to the next slide, please. The root, and to the next one again, the root cause of abortion is unintended pregnancy. UNFPA defines unintended pregnancy as a pregnancy that occurs to a woman who was not planning to have a child or any more children, or that was mistimed and that it occurred earlier than desired. This definition is applied independent of the outcome. There are cases where it will end in abortion. There are cases where it's a miscarriage or an unplanned birth, but not always an unwanted birth. So it's not the same as an unwanted pregnancy. Researchers from the Guttmacher Institute, working with a special program of research development in human reproduction of UNDP, UNFPA, UNICEF, and WHO, have developed a model which estimates rates of unintended pregnancy as well as rates of abortion in 150 countries in 5-year bands. These, sorry, please go back to the first slide. Yeah, the table, the estimated rates of unintended pregnancy. Yeah, thank you. Apologies about that. So these are the, please just stay there for a minute. These are the estimated rates of unintended pregnancy in SADC. You will see that the lowest is Zimbabwe at 74. The highest is Zambia at 123. In Africa, the lowest is Niger and the highest is Uganda Globally, it's estimated that 50% of pregnancies are unintended. The rates have been dropping in many regions of the world, but as you can see from our figures there, they are not dropping nearly fast enough in sub-Saharan Africa. We can go to the next slide now. The UNFPA 2022 report on the state of the world's population is titled Seeing the Unseen, the case for action in the neglected crisis of unintended pregnancy. The report describes the continued high rates of unintended pregnancy to women's lack of agency to make and act on informed decisions regarding their own childbearing. Number of factors contribute to improved agency: education of women and men. When women have completed primary education in sub-Saharan Africa, they have a 26% less likely to have an unintended pregnancy than those without an education. And women who have completed secondary school have a 29% less likely. Higher income and access to better services, ability to articulate and negotiate fertility preferences. Factors which reduce agency include inconsistent and incorrect use of contraceptives, failure of contraceptive methods, and sexual violence. Next slide, please. The laws. What we find in SADC is very restrictive legislation governing abortions. And in many cases, very, very outdated and antiquated. The Madagascar law, for instance, is modeled on the Napoleonic Penal Code of 1817, 200 years ago. Namibia's Abortion and Sterilization Act of 1975 is modeled on an apartheid-era law. The legislation is generally very restrictive. As you will see at the top of this table is South Africa, which has quite a liberal access to abortion, as well as Mozambique, which overhauled its penal code and has made abortion much more readily available. The others, though, you will see, are ranked from less restrictive to most restrictive, and the conditions under which an abortion can be obtained are shown there. What happens with restrictive legislation is that you do not stop abortions. The demand for and the supply are available, continue. And when a person has made up their mind to have an abortion, they will find a way to try to become less safe. WHO estimates that 50% of abortions in Africa are least safe and even dangerous. And it's estimated that 4.7 to 13.2% of maternal deaths worldwide are a result of unsafe abortions. We can move on to the next slide. As you will see from this slide, this is also rates that were estimated from the Guttmacher WHO model. The abortions are still happening in SADC. We have a low of 18 per 1,000 women aged 15 to 49 to a high of 60 in Madagascar. Globally, there is a low rate of 5 in Switzerland and Singapore, and a high of 80 in Georgia. The proportion of unintended pregnancies that end in abortion ranges from 24% in Lesotho to 63% in Madagascar. We can move to the next slide. This slide just shows the same information, but as a table. And not as a table, as a graph. I beg your pardon. It's the information from the table in a graph. And we can move to the next slide. There have been efforts across SADC to persuade our legislators that they need to review the legislation. SAFAIDS, a partner in the Gender Barometer Alliance, is leading a SADC-wide My Choice, Our Choice campaign for legislation. A bill was tabled and slowly through the different processes. A petition was made in Namibia to review the legislation, and there have been also painfully slow consultations happening around the country, very often not really engaging with those who are most affected by the issues. There is countries across the region in terms of actual legislative change. And it's often against well-funded global anti-abortion actors. We will hear later about how these actors have been emboldened by the American overthrow of Roe versus Wade. We can move on to our next slide. So the alternative is we need to actually call for decriminalization of abortion. We need our governments. Can we move to the next slide? We need our governments not as a criminal act, but as a health issue and an issue for women to have decision-making power about their own lives and about their sexual health and well-being. In January of 2016, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights launched an African campaign for decriminalization of abortion. The ACHPR called on governments to decriminalize abortion for the sake of girls' and women's rights and well-being. Last year, on this same day, the AU Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women called on states to decriminalize abortion and empower women and girls to make their own choices about their reproductive health. The WHO, World Health Organization, released new abortion care guidelines this year, 2022. The first recommendation in those guidelines is recommend the full decriminalization of abortion. The International Federation of Gynecology and Obstetrics, or FIGO, which is the body that governs the doctors who really deal with these issues, issued a statement in February of 2022 calling for decriminalization so that we can shift from unsafe to safe abortions. Next slide, please. What decriminalization means is removing abortion completely from penal and criminal laws, not applying any other criminal offenses, and ensuring there are no criminal penalties for assisting with providing information about or providing abortion. Decriminalization would ensure that anyone who has experienced pregnancy loss is not suspected of having an illegal termination or abortion when they look for care. Decriminalization would not allow anybody to coerce or force anyone to have an abortion, because that would be a serious assault and it's non-consensual. A number of countries around the world have fully decriminalized. These include China, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Northern Ireland. And as we spoke about, Mozambique has moved very far along this process to full decriminalization. We can go to our next slide, which is about medication abortion. We do now have the means to have safe and quite easy abortions using 2 drugs. This can be self-managed at home, or it can be done in a health facility. It's not a complicated procedure. Those who do use medication abortion should receive guidance and advice, particularly about the dosage and timing of when they take the medications, and also about any complications. It can be conducted . Sorry, it can be conducted with telehealth support, and there are websites and apps that help women to access this. Can we go to our next slide, please? Which is our next steps. The first thing we all need to work towards is to reduce these high rates of unintended pregnancy. That includes having better access to comprehensive sexuality education, to good quality contraceptives, reduction of GBV, and expansion of gender equality. The second part is to make sure that everybody knows when abortions are legally allowed. Actually, none of the countries, except perhaps Madagascar, totally outlaw abortion completely. There are exceptions when it is permissible. And everyone in this case is all those who might need this abortion, the medical fraternity, the legal fraternity, because abortion is a time-bound procedure. It has to be done within a matter of weeks. You do not have a lot of time for a drawn-out legal battle over it. Encourage our leaders to speak out against stigma around abortion. Abortion should be considered as a medical procedure, end of story, and help women to access the safe medication abortion that is available so that they do not have to resort to all kinds of concoctions. Last slide, please. Longer term actions. We need to challenge our lawmakers on why they are not allowing women to have self-determination. We are a region which fought for self-determination. Why is it that this does not extend to women having self-determination over their own bodies and their own sexual and reproductive health? We need to move to decriminalize abortion and take it out of the laws completely. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Mudekunye, for that for that information from the Southern Africa Gender Protocol Safe Abortion chapter, and pointing us to the need for. Sorry, there is someone who's sharing. Can you not share your screen at the moment? Sorry, Nomti, if you're on the call, can you please just stop that share there? But thank you so much. And as I was saying, thank you for pointing us to some of the good practices that we've seen across the region, in particular from Mozambique, but very worrying trends that 4.2% maternal deaths are showing that women are dying from unsafe abortions. So that's facts that you're reiterating, that we need the new calls for full decriminalization of abortion in our Southern African region, and for our laws and policy environment to be more conducive for women who want to have abortions. Our next item on the agenda is we will do a poll on safe abortion. Nomtik, may you please pull up the poll before we move on to our next presentation. Nomtik. So our poll is on legalization and decriminalization of abortion. Question is, must countries in Southern Africa legalize completely, criminalize abortion? There are three options there: yes, no, and not sure. We have about 50 people online, and we will end the poll when at least 3/4 of us have taken part in the poll and made their thoughts and their voices count on this issue. And as people fill in the poll, our next speaker who will be getting ready to share with us is Mrs. Emma Kalia from Malawi. And Mrs. Kalia is a human rights and gender and women's rights activist who's currently director of the Malawi Human Rights Resource Center. She has worked over the past 30 years in several portfolios, including as the national and regional level chairperson of the Coalition for the Prevention of Unsafe Abortion, as part of the board of directors of the Malawi Electoral Support Network, the Southern Africa Gender Protocol Alliance, a member of Gender Links, as well as a past chairperson and a current advisor of Femnet. And she's also currently a member of the country and regional UN Women advisory groups. I will end the poll. And share the results, which show how participants on the call have responded. On the question on must countries in Southern Africa legalize and completely decriminalize abortion, 67% of respondents said yes, whilst 15% said no, and 18% said they are not sure. And it would be interesting in the last session when we do our discussion that people may also just maybe share more on their thoughts on this issue. You're welcome to continue putting comments in the chat, questions in the chat, and then we will address. And now I call upon Mrs. Kalia to give us her presentation. Mrs. Kalia.
Hello, Tari. Hello.
Yes, you can go ahead, Mrs. Kalia, and share with us the safe abortion work. Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, I was using say earphones because I'm in a wrong place. So I was failing to disconnect. So sorry for that. Otherwise, good afternoon, colleagues. Once again, delighted to join the panel, but also to join this conversation, especially today, when we are commemorating the International Safe Abortion Day under the theme of uncertain times. Colleagues, even when you hear from the presentation that our colleague was making just a short while ago, surely from our specific countries, we will also confirm that the problem remains very huge, and we need to join hands in making sure that maybe we'll get over this problem. I'll cite the case of Malawi. Malawi is one of the countries that also has the highest rate of abortion cases. The same report, there was a report from the same institute, Gachmacha Foundation Institute, that at a certain time, I think it is around 2015, this report came out. At that time, Malawi was experiencing or was having abortions as high as 141,000 per year. There is a young woman, I don't know if she has joined this, I encouraged her to join this panel, who has always reminded us that this is 4 times the number of people that can fill our biggest stadium in Malawi. So that stadium takes 40,000. So it means 4 times that stadium of people, if we can put all of them there. And this number is quite huge to the extent that it contributes to 18% of maternal deaths in Malawi. So we are saying if we had a way of decriminalizing all these laws that criminalize abortion, maybe we would be talking of a different story. And I'm saying this was 2014, now it is 2022. We do not have a research in between. Maybe the number has risen to 250,000. Sad. With the uncertain times that we're talking about, many women, especially during times of disaster, you will see that they will be subjected to a lot of things again, because at times they leave their homes and then they go into some places where they cannot access any kind of service, SRHR service. At the end of it all, there's also a lot of gender-based violence happening there. In the process, if there's sexual gender-based violence, there are some people who get pregnant, or because it's not because they wanted, but because they have been raped. And then there is on the other side where they are saying you cannot abort. then you keep a pregnancy that you did not prepare for. In those rural areas, what do people do? They will go for unsafe abortion, obviously, and then in the process, they die. So there are others who are dying silently. No one knows what is happening to them because they're in extreme rural or they are afraid to come to facilities. Even those that come to facilities, like my colleague said, when a woman has made a decision that I'm going to abort, they don't change. No one can change them. They will still abort. Even if it means knowing that they are going to die, they will do it. What happens next, they don't care. So if it happens in a positive way, they are taken to a facility. Then the facility will take care of that. In the modern world, we have even the calculations that it costs more to take care of post-abortal care than having to bring in the service in advance and like waiting for somebody to abort. So our health facilities have been overstretched because they get on all these cases that should not even have come to the hospital anyway if we had the services readily available, safe abortion services. And our countries do not look at that as a huge burden because a lot of money is spent on caring for people. A person who would have walked into a facility for 10 minutes and get out, that person has to stay in a facility for like 1 month or 2. In the process, some of them die. So it is correct that we start talking about how do we ensure that our countries start understanding, especially from us women. We need a comprehensive campaign that has to touch on each and every member state in the region to make sure that they are changing the way they are doing things. As I'm speaking here in Malawi, we have a problem that even the parliament does not want to discuss this matter. A motion was proposed in support of the bill that has been pending for a long time, termination of pregnancy bill. But most parliamentarians decided to frustrate it because they don't look at these women who die. They look at their own future. Can I come back to parliament? If the churches are saying, you don't do that, now they are protecting themselves. They are not protecting the people that voted for them. So it is a concern that all of us have to work on. And I'm happy that in the region, we are talking about this matter and that we are not sleeping and that each one of us now has started understanding. Some people of goodwill are saying, yes, we support the idea. So I hope that with this coming of the International Safe Abortion Day, it will help us also profile this work, profile our voices, amplify our voices so that we are held all over the world, that the problem is huge and that we need to change the way we do things. Let me stop there, colleagues, I submit.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kalia, for showing us that indeed it is an opportune time to amplify our voices, especially given the International Safe Abortion Day opportunity that we have each and every year. And it is time to escalate our voices and also escalate our efforts as a region through a consolidated, strong regional campaign on safe abortion, and to push our policymakers and parliamentarians to begin to speak about this issue as their electorate, in essence, are dying of unsafe abortion. And to move on to our next speaker would be Mrs. Edna Masiwa from Zimbabwe. Mrs. Masiwa, are you there?
Tarisai, thank you very much for this opportunity. It is my pleasure to speak at this platform where we are also commemorating the International Safe Abortion Day. I'm going to speak to the issue of Zimbabwe and the issue of post-abortion care. I want to highlight that Zimbabwe is one of the highest maternal mortality ratios, which is at 460,000 per 100,000 live births. And just as other countries have been mentioned, abortion in Zimbabwe is restricted. It's only allowed where there has been unlawful sexual intercourse and where the condition of mother is at risk, as well as when there is fetal impairment. So abortion in Zimbabwe, I'll speak to the issue of post-abortion care and highlight that the post-abortion period is the third and final part of the continuum of care for abortion. Abortion is also a sign of an unmet need. And we are saying if abortion is to be done safely, it will save lives. It will also reduce abortion complications. Thereby, we might not have to foot the costs, to bear the costs of post-abortion care. We are also, at the same time as Zimbabwe, we are also reviewing our abortion guidelines, post-abortion care guidelines, so that they are in line with the recently passed published World Health Organization guidelines. I want to speak to the research that was done in 2016, where Zimbabwe had more than 65,000 abortions, and most of the abortions were unsafe. And even though as Zimbabwe, we have a low abortion rate, which stands at 18 abortions per 1,000 women aged 15 to 49. We have a high cost for abortion care. I just did a rough estimate of the cost of care. We are looking at the cost of the health worker. And for Zimbabwe, we are also experiencing a brain drain where nurses and most health workers are leaving the country for greener pastures. And we are saying it's a cost, because if a woman is to come for post-abortion care and there's no health worker, we might end up losing the woman. So I've looked at that as a cost. I've also looked at the cost that might be there if maybe the woman, because of the criminalization of abortion, women come and report at health centers when they really are when their condition has really deteriorated because of the fear of being jailed or arrested. So we might find that there is need for blood. And in Zimbabwe, there has been times when there are shortages of blood. And at one time, blood was going for United States dollars 200. And we also have to cost the intravenous fluid that might be required to save the life of a woman in post-abortion care. We also talk about the issue of antibiotics, the cost of antibiotics. Most of them will be given intravenously, and they might cost more than $10 each. So on average, I just put the post-abortion care cost at 500 USD, because also there is the user fees that is charged for women who visit the health centers for post-abortion care, because if you do not pay, it means you won't receive the post-abortion care. Another cost which people do not really look at is the hidden costs, such as the cost to get transport to the nearest health center that offers post-abortion care, because it's not every health center that offers post-abortion care. You might have to go to the district health center for you to get post-abortion care. So all those costs are not also confused when we are talking about the cost of post-abortion care. And I want to speak to the issue of the psychological costs. The woman goes through a lot of emotional stress because we are also saying there is the threat for criminal prosecution if someone discovers that this was an unsafe, this was an illegal abortion. So all these costs, we need to think about them as we push our advocacy agenda for access to post-abortion care. I also have noted that there are sometimes when post-abortion care, a woman comes to a health center in a very serious condition where maybe they have septic shock and might have to be admitted in the intensive care unit. I'm sure we all will agree that the cost there is very high because intensive care unit means one nurse per patient, means a lot of medication that needs to be given to the woman. It might also mean the woman has to go for surgery. Maybe it's a case of perforated uterus. So the cost of post-abortion care is definitely more than the cost of offering a woman safe abortion. And this, I have found it to be an argument which we can also use as we do our advocacy at national level, because it makes sense to show that the budget, the national budget, is strained because of avoidable costs such as post-abortion care. I want also to say in Zimbabwe, what we have found out is not everyone is aware of the Termination of Pregnancy Act and its provisions in such a way that even those who under the law are eligible to get safe abortions, they also resort to unsafe abortion. So as a way forward, we also would like to recommend that as Zimbabwe, we continue raising awareness on the Termination of Pregnancy Act. I also have noted through my work on abortion in Zimbabwe that very few people are aware of the post-abortion care program in Zimbabwe. And for the post-abortion care program in Zimbabwe, no one will report the patient to the police, except at community level. There's still that energy to want to report someone who has had an unsafe abortion. So there's also need to continuously educate the communities on the provisions or on the post-abortion care program that Zimbabwe has put in place. And currently, our country is aligning the post-abortion care guidelines to the guidelines that were published by the World Health Organization. So we are also saying there has been a study done by Guttmacher Institute in 2016, which also revealed that there were stockouts of the medicines that are required for post-abortion care. So we are really pushing to raise awareness on the Termination of Pregnancy Act, and also we are pushing as a country to also have a decriminalization of abortion in Zimbabwe, because we strongly believe abortion is health care. So as Zimbabwe, we are all doing this work under the National Task Force on Abortion, where different civil society organizations have come together to advocate for access to safe abortion. But I would end here stressing that post-abortion care is more expensive, is costly to our governments. So this can be our advocacy message as we talk to the government representatives. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Masiwa, for that contribution and pointing us to the fact that the cost of post-abortion care is more than actually giving women an option to choose to have safe abortions, and decrying the lack of awareness and knowledge in our communities on safe abortion, on the legislation that we have in our countries, the options and the programs that are there that can help to protect women, and which are entry points for our advocacy, that we can also try to get in and escalate these issues, improve the knowledge of our people on key issues such as having safe abortion. Our next speaker will be from Madagascar, and it is Eugene Andriamasi. Eugene Andriamasi is an advocacy manager who has been working on sexual and reproductive health and rights in Madagascar. He has done advocacy since 2015, contributing to the family planning law in Madagascar, which was passed in 2017. And he continues with his advocacy as a member of the SRI-HR Coalition Madagascar on the Forum for Generation Equality. Over to you, Eugene.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, that's great. Let me talk a bit about Madagascar, because as I said, I've done advocacy for quite a long time. So we are doing, let's say, a campaign to change the situation in Madagascar. First, what is happening here? Basically, abortion is totally illegal, whatever the circumstances. I mean, even if it's for therapeutic reason, if the life of a mother is endangered, if it's for rape or incest, it's not legal at all. Of course, you have abortion here in Madagascar. It's estimation around 75,000 per year. But I think the realities are really different, because here we didn't have studies like a study done, for example, by Guttemacher Institute, but just some small studies. So it's not a real image of what's happening here. And when you say it's not legal, then you say it's unsafe, mostly unsafe, because providers are not trained properly. They don't have access to any kind of training. I mean, you don't go to the university to learn that. And you know, if you don't have it, if you don't have the knowledge, you have to try to learn from other people, word of mouth, and you may do something wrong. It's not only a medical provider, but it's also other, let's say, women or men who are doing it in a more traditional way that, of course, are totally unsafe. The impact of this is death, of course, like in 2012, there was a study from the MOH stating that unsafe abortion was the second cause of maternal death here in Madagascar. We had some other studies after that, but let's say because it's a bit of taboo, we change the methodology and you don't see the same reality as before in the present study. Why we want to change things? Because of this law. As our friend told that before, the law dates back to the Napoleonian Code, which is quite a long time ago. And the law doesn't take into account the realities. Of course, the doctors have a duty to save the people. It was in their code of deontology, but it has been removed in 2011. And there has been attempt to change this law, let's say since maybe 28, because at that time there was the Maputo Protocol that Madagascar has signed but not ratified, and there were an attempt to push that. And if this Maputo Protocol passed, it would have meant that abortion was legal, at least under some circumstances. In 2017, there was also the family planning law, the one, let's say, I've worked for. And inside, there was also an article about therapeutic abortion. And it was rejected again by the Senate this time. And lately, I think you have heard about it. There was a proposition of bill for therapeutic abortion in 2021. And in June, it was officially blocked by the member of parliament, not for legal reason, but because they didn't want to put the subject on the table. So is it really impossible to talk about this subject? I will say no. Actually, since 2018, we have seen some progress. Like before, really before, it was a taboo. You don't talk about abortion. But because we have been collaborating with activists, with civil society, with journalists, with a lot of people like you for some ministry, now it's less and less a taboo. And when there was a last attempt for the bill, it became a bit, let's say, a subject of the society where the debate began to rise. One of the problem is Madagascar is Christian, 80%. And let's say each president is trying to make himself elected by Christian people, saying that he's perfect in some way. And when we talk about, for example, therapeutic abortion, because of a misunderstanding of the population, because we are not enough information, we are thinking that we want to push for abortion on demand. But it's not that. It's a minimum change, a question of human rights that we are trying to change, to push, but it's not, let's say, it's not hard yet. That's why we are developing all this relation, all this workshop with civil societies, to make them understand why we are trying to push for this legal change. And when you talk, they understand. But before, they didn't know the reality of that. And let's say in their church, it was just like, no, we are not going to accept anything. We have also, as I said, work with other people like journalists, like more CSOs, like parliamentarian, and we are trying to sensitize them to push for change. And when you listen to them, they say, we are not against it, but there is other priorities. So let's say, even if they are closed, now there are opportunities. And we try to understand also why they are refusing presently to pass it. One explanation may simply that there will be a presidential election in 2023. It's very soon. Every political party are trying to position themselves as the right one, and they avoid sensitive subjects. But even if they avoid it, it will be a subject for the society. And we are trying to raise the attention of the people more and more on this. And I think it's coming. It's coming slowly. With doctors, it's okay. Let's say more or less. We talk with gynecologist from the national order here. They recognize that they are doing it. I mean, the therapeutic one, when we need to save the life of a mother. So it's normal that they need a law to protect them. And maybe it could be a first step for a change here in Madagascar. The next opportunity, if we push for law, maybe after the election. But before the election in 2023, we need to make a huge campaign that this is human rights, this is talking about life of women who are endangered, this is needing a change in the country. And maybe before they won't be able to position themselves, or maybe some will do, but after there will be no reason for them to refuse. Of course, there is opposition which is created, let's say, by some churches, like Catholic churches. But when you really, really, really go into the deep of the conversation, they understand that there is a minimum. I will say that it's a huge process that we are doing, trying to convert the opinion, the ideas of a country from totally no to yes, but, or even yes. And it takes time. It's a behavior change in some way. And it will be done step by step. If we go too fast, like it has been the case for the last year bill, it will just be a no, but we will take time. And I think I want to share that with you, dear colleagues, that even if you see us in Madagascar as maybe the last of the last, we are doing huge efforts to change the situation here, and we are not alone. Many people are thinking like us, but maybe not stating it yet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eugene, for that contribution there and for the efforts that you are pushing in Madagascar to push for safe abortion. And thank you for highlighting to us and showing us the links between SRHR and in particular safe abortion, elections and political office, and what bearing this has on what kind of actions are taken. And for the point on collaborations and collective action from policymakers and working with journalists so that you can change perceptions, break the taboos and change people's opinions and push for legal change in Madagascar, and decrying the archaic laws that continue to exist. And through this collective effort that you were talking about, we are hoping that as a region, we all move together and we move towards one direction, progression to improving the lives of women and the lives of women when they want to choose and have a voice and a choice on their bodies. Our next speaker will be Asante Katiti from Namibia. Asante is a gender equality activist in Namibia, and she will be sharing with us about safe abortion and the campaigns and the work that they've been doing in Namibia on this issue. Over to you, Asante.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Oh, yes, we can hear you.
All right then. So thank you very much, number one, to be accorded an opportunity to be on this platform. I'm a little nervous as well as very excited to actually take part. And I think quite what is interesting, what's happening, I think even when we're looking at the chats of that's happening in the chat and the conversations that was happening, you could quite see that there is, the debate happening between pro-abortion and anti-abortion. And I think platforms such as this is very important for all of us to actually sit together as a collective and actually deal with this issue. So I'm very excited for that. I think, if eventually we look at the report that GenderLinks has provided, again, thank you very much. I think we need as much literature within our sectors as is possible, and GenderLinks has continuously been doing that over the years. Perhaps to contextualize Namibia a little bit, initially I was a bit bombarded in terms of where I should start. But I wanted to start on a political front, because to a great degree, I believe this is a political conversation that we are having and that we should be having, and that politics and leadership has a great deal to do with where we are as well. But I think Namibia is one of those countries that has quite late in Africa and sub-Saharan Africa gotten its independence. And specifically, we got our independence in 1990. And so I wanted to start off from the concept of women in conflict. Oftentimes, when we look at, or when we talk about women in conflict, we also neglect to look at the history that we come from as women. And for example, we have the Abortion and Sterilization Act number 2 of 1975. Namibia only got its independence in 1990. And majority of the laws that we have, of course, absorbed had also been, from the former apartheid government and the apartheid system. And so I want us to really look at these two distinctions: the Abortion and Sterilization Act of 1975 and Namibia's independence at 1990. What this goes to show is that normally with women in conflict, there's a lot that we neglect. And there's a lot of human rights, health rights, safety rights, and so many things that as a people, especially in conflict zones, that we actually neglect when it comes to women. And I think this act was an afterthought that was just adopted in a copy and paste kind of a situation. If we look at the statistics in Namibia, for example, that also Gender Links has provided, 104 out of 1,000 women end up in abortion. For example, 28%, again, like I'm saying, 28% of what is the thing? 28% of pregnancies end in abortion. In 2017, we had about over 7,000 abortion cases that were reported. And you must understand, if you look at the population of Namibia, we are not even close to 3 million. We are somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million in terms of population statistics. So when you look, and those numbers have grown of abortion that is reported, close to about 10,000. And Namibia is increasingly, other countries beautifully in SADC are reducing in terms of these stats, but Namibia is gradually increasing in terms of the number of abortion cases that we have reported. And I think quite importantly, what we must also look at is the fact that the cases that we have and the numbers that we have come from cases that go to the Ministry of Health or to hospitals, for example, after complications, right? Those are the only numbers that we have recorded. The rest is either people that never seek support or never seek healthcare, and the others that are continuously suffering in silence. Now, civil society, I think over the years, has done quite massive and applaudable work in the fight for the right of choice for women and the liberalization of abortion, pro-choice and giving the woman the right to choose what happens to their bodies. And I think, when was it? In 2020, there was a collection of civil society organizations that had given over a petition to legislation, which means to the government, to parliament, because they are the legislative house that has to then look at laws. They have to look at the enactment of bills, and practically they're responsible for legislation. And currently, the Namibian government is in the process of running what they call public forums, meaning due to this petition, based on the work that civil society has done, the government, what they do, every case that comes in gets given to a standing cabinet committee. In our instance, it has been given to the cabinet committee that deals with issues of gender and gender-related issues, and they have continued, and they are still continuously doing consultations. And I bet that's where I want to come in, I think, as well, to sort of expand on the work that we have been doing in Namibia as well. The concern that I've always had is asking, and I think even in the debate that we're having, is asking the right questions oftentimes, because this is a very democratic process, whereby you call community meetings. They're open to any public member. They're open to church members. They're open, any person can come and then give their objections or give their reasons as to why they need the laws to be abolished, or the reason why the law needs to stay the same. And I think oftentimes the engagement, particularly in Namibia currently in the public space, has been with, especially with church leaders and community leaders as well. So it's asking the right questions. Should we decriminalize abortion laws in Namibia? And why should that happen? That is a beautiful question to ask. However, I always feel like if the methodology is flawed, then the process and the outcomes will equally be flawed. And perhaps I can unpack that a little bit. To this day, and this is not a debate that's only been happening now. This is a debate that's been coming since and before independence in Namibia as well, right? And I think we have been operating under the auspices of the issues of abortion being within the auspices and being under the umbrella of morality. But I think from the previous speakers and all of the colleagues that have spoken, what we need to do is remove it from the box of morality and religion and all of those things and put it in the box of healthcare, because I think that's where it belongs. That's where the conversation needs to happen. And if one can easily scrutinize, for example, the Constitution of Namibia, especially when we are dealing with the principles of state policy, the rights of people, the Namibian government makes provision, for example, for healthcare services to every individual, irrespective of their background and irrespective of their genders. And the, oh, hi. And the other issue as well is really also looking at within that, and this is part of Article 95, if you're a Namibian, for example, who's listening, part of Article 95 also makes for the provision for the governments who enact or to promote legislation that can address issues of people who are disadvantaged. And then again, when we look at women who are suffering or women who do not have access to abortions and facilities as well as to laws, then they would automatically fall within the category of disadvantaged, right? So it's not necessarily the ambiguity of the laws that we have, but perhaps the understanding of where do we take the debate from, right? Where are we going from instead of just being it a moral issue? And I know, and again, there were people, for example, in these very chats of ours that were speaking about the issue of let's rather promote safe sex, for example, and access to safe sex, because abortion, for example, is tantamount to murder. And those are the conversations that we're having. But I think the conversation that I really want to bring back home, especially even to people listening from home and listening from Namibia, is, and again, as the first speaker was saying when she was introducing, for example, the statistics throughout the various countries and what we found, especially in SADC, whether the debate about, for example, safe sex has not worked, right? Because we have made provision, for example, in our Education Acts to ensure that children are spoken to about safe sex. And I'm specifically talking about children because our statistics are staggeringly between teenagers, right? If we're talking about unwanted pregnancies, we are looking within that demographic, a large demographic of young people who, for example, culturally have no access to sexual education, starting from home, who religiously have no access to sexual education or to these particular conversations from the religious standpoint. But oftentimes when we come in and only when we are disagreeing with whether abortion or the law should be repealed and those safe spaces and facilities should be provided for, those are some of the things that we're lacking and looking into. So just singularly looking at, and this is why I believe that it's a very holistic and a very complex issue to look at, and that there's no just one particular solution. And with that, for example, the civil society speaks about developing a comprehensive action abortion care program, right? When we have to repeal the law, there needs to be care programs, for example, that looks at the sexual reproductive health rights and training, where sexual education training would become comprehensive as well. We are looking at abortion post-care that would then look at looking after people, whether it's mental and psychiatric services that we're providing for, whether it's physical and health issues that we're looking at, but post-care is important as well. Pre-care is just as important, taking people through counseling about the choices that they're making. It's just providing a holistic service, making sure that contraceptives, for example, and family planning is also available. So it's not necessarily, when we're talking about the right to abortion, we're not necessarily just talking about the complete eradication of safe sex, for example, or talking about contraceptives and family planning, but it's recognizing that abortion exists. And it's recognizing that a number that when we talk about 10,000, for example, cases that are recorded in Namibia, that's a staggering, sad and scary number, because it's not for, and especially for women in rural areas, right? It's not every area in Namibia where you have access, for example, to healthcare services, where you have access, for example, to clinics. Those services, the further away you go from rural areas, becomes more accessible. And I think even during COVID-19, for example, one of the issues that we faced as a country was the lack of contraceptives, right? Because a lot of things could not be brought into the country, because of all, everything that had happened during COVID as well. So really, it's about removing the blindfold from the fact that it's a moral discussion, because it has gone beyond it being a moral conversation at this particular point in time. And it's really, and even if I have to look at the current democratic process that the country has embarked upon, which is again the community engagement to see, should we legalize abortion or not? Should we repeal the laws that are in place? Especially the Act of 1975. I always feel personally, I feel like oftentimes we go through political processes so that we can rubber stamp them at the end of the day. So that at the end of the day, we can say, hey, you know what, we will continue oppressing disadvantaged women in a certain category. Why? Because we've gone out into the community and we have gathered information, and everybody, or the majority of the people that we've spoken to, says no. So we'll continue with the oppressive processes. Because of the fact that this is an issue that is not legalized in the country, you harnessing or getting information in a public setting already is problematic. And that's how I was talking about, if the methodology is flawed, the outcomes will also equally be flawed. If you're having a public section, for example, where you're talking about should it or should it not be legalized on the basis of morality, for example, right? Not on the, and because the questions that are being asked, and I think a lot of activists in Namibia also felt like it was a very biased process, and I would personally propose that the process starts over and looks at other ways and refines the methodology, especially with civil society as well, right? Refines the methodology in terms of how do we get the right information. Because it's a criminal act, and because it's criminalized, because it's stigmatized, people affected by it don't show up at the public hearings to come and talk directly about these are the concerns that I have. These are the complications that I've experienced. I think during the period of 2017, 2018, the Ministry of Health, for example, had reported that in our case, the benefit is that the Ministry of Health does not report complications related to abortion, because they are scared that if they do that, then they will furthermore remove more women from actually seeking healthcare when they need to. Health practitioners have reported that by the time people come and seek assistance, which is again now these cases over 10,000 and growing that we get reported, by the time they show up for healthcare, it's too late. And some of these women have to be surgically, their wombs have to be removed, meaning that it causes, they of course classify that as disability as well. So it goes into that particular category. Other women have lifelong complications, as well as it also leads to death, because they are scared. If a process is criminal, if what is happening to your body and the choices that you've made becomes criminalized, you're scared to look for healthcare services. And I think that's practically the issue around that we have in Namibia. Besides the numbers and the data that I've spoken about, I think the other issue that I also wanted to mention in terms of this particular act is, like other countries, of course, there are provisions where women can medically and approvedly seek for abortions in instances, or for example, if it's a mentally disturbed person or a person with disability that has, for example, been raped, in cases of incest, in cases where it endangers the woman's life. But I think the fourth issue that we could also look at in within civil society structures, and that we could expand on, is the one that specifically speaks about it endangers the mental health of women. And I think mental health is perhaps one of the issues that we could zoom into, because it leaves it leaves ambiguity in the law, right? Because in other specifications, it speaks about mental defects for children. But when it comes to the endangerment of women, the fourth element, I think, is the endangerment of mental health for women as well. And perhaps we could also approach it as a mental health issue, right? Again, then it falls within the category of it's a health issue. Yes, I understand, especially also in the chats, and I don't dismiss how you feel about it. The thing is, when people speak about abortions and the access to it, no one is saying that you're going to force and be dragged to go and have an abortion. That's not what we are saying. It's still a choice. If you don't want, based on your moral reasons, not to have an abortion, you would still not have an abortion. It's not forcing you. It's really looking at the people who already are doing it in a very unsafe space, who are already losing their lives, who are having lifelong health issues. That is really the conversation. And I think that's where the sympathy that we're trying to pull from, it is in existence. Us ignoring it, us fighting it on the altars, us fighting it based on, the fact that we're claiming it's murder, or us fighting for it and crying based on all of these agreements, does not perhaps just as a good example is when we're dealing with the issues of the girl child not
Sorry, you
having
need to be
access
rounding up now, Asante.
Yes, I'm definitely rounding up. The example that I wanted to give is, as I'm rounding up, thank you very much, is the access to young women to, for example, menstrual products, right, when they're on their periods. And as the debate was happening, one of the things that one of the activists had mentioned is, while we are sitting and debating about whether women should have, or girls in schools should have access to menstrual products, the girl in the school is still bleeding. And I think that's the takeaway from this. While we're still sitting and debating about whether it's right or wrong, there are still women who are dying. There are still women who are losing their lives. There are still women who are affected by this. There are still women right now, as we're having this conversation, who's experiencing complications. And those are the women that we need to address as an urgent healthcare issue. I thank you. That's from my part in Namibia.
Okay, thank you so much, Asante, for the moving words and for the passion issue, and pointing out to the fact that we are where we are because of politics and leadership having a bearing on where we are as women today, and bringing out the fact that there has been a lot of moralizing on this issue, and we need to move away from that kind of discussion, remove this kind of blindfold, and recognize that abortion does exist, and need to start looking at this as a key healthcare issue, but also as a human rights issue. And also to the fact that, pointing out to the fact that if such situations, if abortion is criminalized, then women will not have a voice or a choice or be able to come out to speak out about their experiences, or even be involved in consultations and conversations around this issue. Our next item on the agenda, which is the last one, would be a poll on safe abortion. Nomsi, are you able to pull the poll? Nomsi, can you share the poll on our second poll for the day? So our second poll for the day will be on, the question says, a woman should be able to choose to terminate a pregnancy in the first 3 months of her pregnancy. The options are strongly agree, disagree, neutral, agree, or strongly agree. We'll stop the poll when it lists 3/4 of all of us on the poll have answered the poll, and we'll share the results. As we fill in the poll, our last session will be a quick discussion. Any questions, comments on the discussion that we have had this afternoon, please do raise your hand. Please do put in the chat, and we can also direct the questions to some of our speakers who are still on the call. We'll give it 20 seconds more, and then we'll end the poll. So in our poll, about 33 people have responded, and the poll question was: a woman should be able to choose to terminate a pregnancy in the first 3 months of a pregnancy. The 46% of people. So I'm sharing the results now. 46% of participants said they strongly agree that women should be able to choose to terminate their pregnancies in the first 3 months. 20% said they agree. 17% said they strongly disagree. 14% that they're neutral, said that they're neutral about the issue, and 3% said they disagree. And maybe you can put in the chat any comments on this and your position on this issue. But we have a couple of hands before we close. Part of our discussion, we have a couple of hands. We'll start with Godfrey. Godfrey, you can share with us your comments, questions, contribution. Godfrey, you have your hand up. Can you go ahead? Please unmute. Please go ahead with your question and your contribution. Sorry, Godfrey, you're not very audible there. You're not very audible there. Maybe you can put your question in the chat. We can move on to Gladness as Godfrey fixes.
Can you hear me now?
Hello. Gladness, no, you can go ahead with your question.
How are you?
Very well, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Tari and others. I have to thank all the presenters for the nice presentation. For me, it gives more lights on the process on this decriminalization of the abortion, because it is a big issue in Tanzania, and this is started since the popularization of the Gender and the Development Protocol and SADC countries. It is a big issue. Even the members of parliament discussed a lot, and that protocol has been ratified without that article of abortion. But as other speakers say, this is a high time to legalize abortion to our young girls
and women as well. My question, I have two questions. First question, how many countries at SADC region currently ratified or legalized the abortion? It helps us in a process to know the concrete examples from our colleagues. That is one. And second, what is the best approach of creating awareness when we want to get support from stakeholders? What is the best approach? We have media, we have decision makers, we have communities. Now, where to start? Because we don't want to fuel. We have religious leaders. Where is the best stakeholder or a place to begin with this awareness? That is my second question. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think we'll just take all the questions and then we'll move on to the answers. Maybe Kubi can take some of the questions.
Sure.
As well as Mrs. Mdekunye on the research. The last hand, I think, Asante, do you have a hand up or?
Yes, I do have a hand up.
Okay. You can go ahead, then we'll go back to Godfrey if you are now okay.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm not quite sure if mine necessarily constitutes as a question, but I think one of the other things that, and perhaps it could also serve as an answer, is really civil society. I believe in the work that we have been doing, especially in Namibia and in SADC as well. But I want to speak specifically to Namibia as well. Has really, civil society in a way is a political movement, right? Because it holds people accountable. It pushes for legislation change. And one of the things that I would really, really encourage, and I think I also forgot it, that's why I'm bringing it up here, and in what I wanted to say, is for young women to form political movements, right? Because we already have a great number of support that we have so many movements that can form a coalition, because I think that the best change can happen in the legislative houses that we have. The best change happens in parliament, where you can have access to the laws, how to repeal the laws, how to influence decision makers. Because at the moment, we are on opposite sides, right? It's people in power, it's people making the decisions, and then it's civil society on the outside. And I feel like the process takes longer when we are actually on the outside. So perhaps it's also time that we revolutionize political movements, or rather revolutionize civil society spaces and actually push for our people. Because a lot of times, as people in civil society, we are barely seen in politics, right? And I think that would be a wonderful approach in the movement as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Godfrey, you can go ahead and then we'll get to the answer.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I hope I'm clear now.
Yes, you are. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon to everyone. Like I said, I'm Godfrey from Uganda. And I want to thank the organizing committee of this discussion or Zoom discussion. I'm really proud of you people. When we talk of unsafe abortion, one thing I want to start with is that unsafe abortion is a reality now in Uganda, Sub-Saharan Africa, and maybe in the whole world. Because what we are dealing with at this point in time is a reality, is not fact, is something that is happening and hitting in all the corners of the world. Allow me share with you a brief experience that we got from our center. That is, a testimony that was given by one of the young girls at the age of 16. When 20 real, and yet she was in school on their daughters is not a good thing. So she rushed to our center, and when we sat her down and we tried to talk to her, one of our psychosocial supporter tried to talk to her, and she disclosed that at one point, when she shared her story with the friend advised her to take 6 tablets of paracetamol. Can you imagine? In order to, to terminate the pregnancy. So what am I trying to say here? Abortion should be legalized such that we cease losing lives of young people, young girls who are going to turn out to be fruitful leaders of this world. There are a lot of, myths, misconception surrounding abortion in our societies. That means now for us to succeed, civil society organizations must not keep quiet, because I see that is the only movement that can push for changes in legislation and policy that will finally maybe help us ease this, stringent law on abortion. The truth is, whether safe or unsafe, abortion is happening. And there is nothing that we can reverse apart from giving solution to some of those bottlenecks. Short of that, we shall achieve nothing. One of the speakers talked about social media. Yes, social media will do part of the job, but it will not accomplish all. Just like I say, there are a lot of myths and misconceptions, even surrounding, contraception, which is one of the intervention that was meant to curb, unsafe abortion and teenage pregnancy and unsafe abortion also in one way or the other. But now, still, if those misconceptions are still existing in the societies, if there are religions that are not accepting such still up to this time, then I don't think if we shall succeed really without first changing the mindset of these influential leaders, especially the cultural leaders, the religious leaders. These are very influential people in the societies. So we need to change their mind. Let us engage them into dialogues. Let us engage the different age group into dialogues in our different capacities, in the different areas that we are serving from, either as an individual. One of the speakers, as I was watching her speaking, she was really emotional. I saw her feeling this pain at her heart. She was feeling the pain at her heart. So let us push for unsafe abortion. We should not keep quiet. When we keep quiet, then we shall lose the whole generation that we have. I am a health worker, professional, and I am also an evangelist by calling. But that doesn't mean that I should keep quiet, because it is not every problem on this earth has got many solutions. If spiritually one fails to get help, this person can be helped medically. So we should accept to live with those truths. If something is a reality, it is a reality. There is nothing we can change about it. So let us push for unsafe abortion or decriminalization of abortion.
Thank you so much, Godfred. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
for your contribution.
And thank you, Jane.
One last question from Titi, and then we move on to the responses. We're not doing so good on time, but Titi Linda, you can kindly go ahead.
All right, thank you so much. So my name is Titi Linda Patience Masusu. I'm from Zimbabwe. And I think this is one of the very most interesting topics, because I'm not just only speaking from a perspective, but I'm also speaking because at one point I had an illegal abortion when I was a teenager. So I think this issue is that we also need to understand that in our communities and in our country specifically, access to contraceptives as in adolescent is a problem. You do not have access to contraceptives. And at the same time, when you have a teenage pregnancy, we now have members of the health sector benefiting from the issue that young women actually are being pregnant at a young age. Because you find that since abortion is not legal, you find that there are some health practitioners who are now charging exorbitant fees for young women to have these abortions. At the end of the day, we now have young women resorting to cheaper ways of getting abortions, and these are not always safe, and this sometimes has got dire consequences on an individual's health. So I also think that going forward, my question is now, going forward, what then should we do? Because it is happening in our communities that we have members of the health force who are now benefiting from the fact that we have abortion, which is illegal in our country. So then what can we do to ensure that there are people who do not abuse the fact that we have abortion, which is illegal? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tsitsi, for sharing that personal account and for your contribution. Over to our panelists, responders, Kubi. Some of the questions: how many countries have legalized abortion? What is the best approach to advocacy efforts? And what really should we do going forward? What can we do to decriminalize and also get to a space where we have safe abortion across our Southern African countries? Kubi, over to you.
Okay, before I respond, Tali, I was just wondering if I think Lynette would be best placed to answer, but if she's unable to connect, I'm happy to do so. Lynette?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so there are 2 countries in SADC which allow abortion on request, which is South Africa and Mozambique. And you can see that clearly in the table, which is taken from the chapter. The process of how you get to this, I think, is one that many of us can speak to, because it's not easy. Meema from Malawi, Asante from Namibia, I'm sure can talk about how difficult it is to discuss with those in parliament. But you do need somebody who appreciates that this is a human rights issue for girls and women, that it's an issue of life and death for many girls and women, that it's an issue where some people are making money out of the situation, as Tsitsi has just spoken to us about, and where they actually put value on the lives and the decision-making ability of a girl and a woman to make their own decision about their own body and their own reproductive health.
Thank you, Mrs. Mudekunye. Yes, Kubi, you have your hand up.
I think just to add to what Lynette has said, and I think it was the speaker from Madagascar. I understand the sensitivities around this issue and the fact that there are many quarters where there is opposition. But I think, and I firmly believe this, I think we design our advocacy in a way that accommodates the opposition. So for example, we're not going to push anything because it's an election year in Madagascar. However, it might well be the best time to do it. I think Lynette said it correctly. She said it's a human rights issue. And because we've had this sort of sporadic almost approach where there's highs and lows, and we're feeding into the morality debate, the religious debate around this issue of safe abortion. But ultimately, it's about human rights. It's about young women and women dying when they shouldn't be. It's maternal mortality rates increasing. So it's really about a concerted, consistent campaign like SAFEDS does with My Choice, you know, where they consistently found their champions and have used them at very strategic levels, like the SADC Parliamentary Forum. So I think one of the issues, Asante, is I think you make a very good point. We need to get ourselves into those decision-making structures. And at the same time, identify strategic champions within those structures that will understand, you know, that we can then work with and educate and raise awareness about the issue as a human rights issue. My last point, Lynette alluded to the fact that there are 2 countries in the region where abortion is available on demand, Mozambique and South Africa. I think what's very important to understand is that both those countries took very different routes. South Africa went the full way, they put in place legislation, termination of pregnancy, etc. But also very important to understand that it's not, the implementation hasn't been optimal. Now, Mozambique did something very different. They didn't put in place a termination of pregnancy act. What they did, the abortion was criminalized in their penal code, Lynette similarly, of 1886. So what they did was just decriminalize it. They removed that clause. So I think it's really, every country needs to think through what the best strategic intervention would be, because in many respects, the health approach is probably a better and easier one, because what Mozambique said is that actually safe abortion is a health issue. We now need to work at it from that perspective. And I think what happened there was politically, and interestingly enough, it happened just before an election. But what didn't happen at the same time was the health system wasn't as prepared as it should have been. So I think, you know, that these approaches need discussion as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll move on to Colleen Lomona, and then to Mrs. Kalia, and then finally to Asante as we close.
Thanks, Terry. I just want to say, having edited the Barometer chapter, that what seems to me to be new this year is the very high level voices, starting with the World Health Organization, calling for complete decriminalization of abortion. And I've shared the link to the op-ed in the Mail and Guardian today that Lynette wrote. And I think sometimes we're just not very strategic as activists. All of our countries are members of the WHO. This is the World Health Organization. And their first principle in their revised 2022 guidelines on abortion is that it should be completely decriminalized. And there are about 6 countries in the world that have gone that route. The WHO is saying that, and the AU is saying that. And so why don't we cotton onto that? Our countries are members of these bodies. Therefore, they are enjoined to those positions. Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution, Colleen. Move on to Mrs. Kalia. You can go ahead.
Thank you, Tarisai. Thank you, colleagues, all of you. I'm coming back not necessarily to respond to any question, but just to add my voice to 1 or 2 things that the colleagues have spoken to, but also to emphasize that in the SADC region, Africa in general, we seem to not really understand this colonization of the mind, because some of the laws that we are keeping are from, like for Malawi, it's a British law, 1930. Like the one for Mozambique was 1980 something. I mean, in 18 something. Are we serious? The British people, they did away with those laws and we are sticking to them. Then we tell ourselves that we are not colonized. We are still colonized. The owners left them. Us, we want to keep them. And you don't really have an explanation for that, because the owners, the ones who originated those laws, did not want them because they knew they infringe on people's rights. But here in the SADC region in Africa, we can even have the audacity of defending the same laws that things should continue the way they are. I get emotional, especially I get more emotional when this is coming from women who can one day see a woman dying, or their own daughter, or their cousin, but all these who will die are women. They will never be men. So I just want to encourage each one of us. This day would never have been put in place if there was no problem. Those that decided to have this day put in place, they knew that there's a huge problem, and this problem is for women. And it's not only for women the way I'm speaking here as Emma Karia. It is a problem for poor people, because Emma Karia can go into a facility. In 5 minutes, I would be in a facility. But those poor people in rural areas cannot access anything, even if there's another facility that can give such a service. 1, they cannot get there. 2, they do not have money. So those that die most are poor. So this problem is for the poor. It's not for me. And if we keep defending things that we know that will impact on the poor people, is as good as packing our bags and leaving the space of civil society, packing our bags and say, I'm not an advocate, I'm not a feminist, I want to be supporting things that oppress women. So I wanted to make this as clear as possible in the context of the SADC Alliance, that some of us get emotional when people cannot understand what we're talking about. We should be going out there and tell each one of those people who are still opposing, because most of them, there is the whole patriarchy that has captured them, to the extent that even when it is the man speaking, they will be speaking on behalf of men who are the ones who even impregnate women, even rape them, leave them with a pregnancy that they will never come back to take care of. And we speak on behalf of them. That I get a bit worried. So I wanted to register my concern that as we're getting out of this call, each one of us has a responsibility to change the narrative. We should be, if we are part of this conversation, we should be going out there and tell people it is wrong to defend things that are indefensible. I thank you, colleagues.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Kalia, for those words. Indeed, collective responsibility that we all need to have, and let us stop defending the patriarchy that is influencing the continuation of such issues in our societies. Our last comment, very brief, very short. Asante Katiti, you have your hand up, 30 seconds, and we'll be closing.
All right, thank you very much. I wanted to address the issue on advocacy and how we can enhance advocacy in our various countries. As has been mentioned before, I think advocacy, there's so many different ways in which advocacy happens. And I think what we need to do is to exhaust every avenue possible and leave no gap between. And the other thing is really also about understanding your country, understanding the laws and systems that exist, understanding the processes, because we cannot do advocacy in isolation. You need to understand the processes, because I know, for example, in Namibia, individuals can, for example, also directly write, for example, in terms of how bills can be amended and how laws can be changed. So as individuals, we need to understand how do the legal processes and systems work in our countries. But again, as the other person had also mentioned, it's really also about having strategic champions, right? In advocacy, we have radicals, and then we also, what I call it, we have diplomats. Diplomats is the strategic people, is the people that are already in the systems that we need to befriend, and perhaps they can also guide us in terms of advocacy. But I think it's really about understanding your country and every avenue that is possible. And again, be part of politics and understand the language as well, not just English or the native languages that we speak, but every sector speaks a language. And we need to understand in order for us to be able to penetrate these particular systems as well. So I think in advocacy, language is just as important. I think those are my contributions.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for those great contributions all around. Move on. I'll give the floor to Kubi Rama to close our dialogue for today. Kubi, in 30 seconds.
I think I'm Kubi Rama, Executive Director of Gender Links, and I believe everything has been said, but I think the thing that we need to leave here with today is that we have tried softly. We've tried so many different approaches, but I think the bottom line is when it comes to gender and issues such as safe abortion, we need to stop being apologetic. it's like any other human rights issue. We need to advocate, we need to push the boundaries, we need to push agendas. We weren't apologetic when we were fighting against apartheid or when we're fighting for Namibia's independence. So it's the same kind of struggle. And I think, Emma, like you, I get a bit frustrated when we start to play into those stereotypes, the existing context to fight our battles. Yes, we have to get champions. We have to understand how it all works. But I think it's very important that we move, and we move unapologetically, and we say that this is a human right. We're not asking for anything that is not due to women and girls in this region. So I think if we leave with that message, I, for one, will be pleased to, that we will have moved forward. At least, Emma, we will start decolonizing our minds and the minds of those who are opposing abortion. Thanks, Tari.
Thank you, Kubi. Thank you
Kubi.
to our stellar list of speakers today, and thanks to the great audience and participants for your contributions. Thank you so much. We've come to the end of our call. Happy International Safe Abortion Day, everyone. Goodbye.